Saturn's rings are one of the most famous sights in all of astronomy. The rings look solid, but they're not. They're actually made up of millions of particles, all orbiting Saturn together. The particles are mostly ice and dirt. Some are as small as grains of dust, others are large boulders. The rings are also razor thin compared to Saturn's bulk. This series of pictures was taken as the Cassini spacecraft moved from below the rings to above them. You can see how thin the rings are. When you compare their width to their thickness, it's about the same as a sheet of paper that's as wide as the city of San Francisco. Oh, and that little guy you saw shooting across the top was one of Saturn's moons. We'll talk about a couple of those in just a few minutes. Saturn's rings are mysterious. They're more than just belts of particles orbiting the planet. For example, there are spokes in them, as you see here. Some of them are even braided. Nobody expected these features in the rings, and some of them are still a puzzle. It's as if somebody created them just to delight and fascinate us. So how did the rings get there? I believe they were created at the same time Saturn was, a few thousand years ago. Of course, evolutionists won't accept this. Here's what a NASA scientist had to say about them. After all this time, we're still not sure about the origin of Saturn's rings, says Jeff Kusi, a planetary scientist at the NASA Ames Research Center. Kusi speculates that some hundreds of millions of years ago, a time when the earliest dinosaurs roamed our planet, Saturn had no bright rings. Then, he says, something unlikely happened. Yes, that's right. Here's Jeff Kusi again. A moon-sized object from the outer solar system might have flown nearby Saturn where tidal forces ripped it apart. Or maybe an asteroid smashed one of Saturn's existing moons. The debris encircled the planet and formed the rings we see today. Are you starting to detect a pattern in evolutionist explanations? Not all evolutionists take refuge in this, though. There's a report from NASA on Saturn's rings that I think is interesting. Here's what it says. Saturn's rings, age and origin unknown. Saturn defies evolutionary models in several ways. For one thing, its magnetic field doesn't match evolutionary predictions at all. As one article explained, Saturn dumbfounded planetary theorists who study dynamo models by having a highly symmetric internal magnetic field. A field that is symmetric about the rotation axis violates a basic theorem of magnetic dynamos. Saturn's magnetic field doesn't seem to be coming from a dynamo. This would be impossible if Saturn were billions of years old, as evolution says. But there's no problem at all if Saturn is only thousands of years old, as the Bible says. But there's an even bigger problem we need to discuss. A recent study took a closer look at the formation of Saturn and Jupiter. Remember that model of the gas and dust cloud that supposedly formed all the planets? Well, the study discovered that Saturn, and Jupiter as well, wouldn't be here today if that model was true. One report on the study described this model and then said this: these theories fail to describe the formation of gas giant planets in a satisfactory way. Gravitational interaction between the gaseous protoplanetary disk and the massive planetary cores causes them to move rapidly inward over about 100,000 years in what we call the migration of the planet and the disk. Theories predict that the giant protoplanets will merge into the central star before planets have time to form. This makes it very difficult to understand how they can form at all. Astronomers call this the migration problem. In plain English, Jupiter and Saturn would have both migrated inwards and slammed into the sun billions of years ago if that whole gas and dust story was true. Since we see Jupiter and Saturn today, obviously the gas and dust story isn't true. The report concluded this way: understanding the formation of giant planets is currently one of the major challenges for astronomers. If the evolutionary model says that Jupiter and Saturn shouldn't be there, but they are there instead, I'd say that's more than a major challenge for the model. I'd say it falsifies the model completely, wouldn't you? We see then that Saturn creates huge problems for evolution. But we're not done yet. Saturn also has dozens of moons, some of which are fascinating. Let's look at a couple. This is Enceladus, one of Saturn's moons. Our first close-up pictures of Enceladus were beautiful, but nobody expected what would come next. When we started taking pictures from a different angle, we saw something unusual. This is Enceladus, below Saturn's rings. Do you see the faint smudge below the moon? A closer look reveals that Enceladus has a fountain coming out of its south pole. When the pictures were colorized to bring out invisible details, we saw that this wasn't just a little spray, it's a huge geyser. Evolutionists were, and still are, stunned by this. Evolutionary models can't explain it. The problem is that Enceladus is supposed to be billions of years old. It's supposed to have cooled off from its formation eons ago. It's not supposed to have the energy to do any of this. Also, we recently took a close look at some of the other moons of Saturn. We found out that Enceladus's neighbors are much brighter than they're supposed to be. Apparently, Enceladus is spray painting them with ice and snow. Evolutionary models say that Enceladus is old, cold, and dead, but it looks like it's none of those things. Enceladus is a great piece of evidence for a young solar system. Then there's Titan. Titan is Saturn's largest moon. This is another great example of how over and over again evolutionary theories have failed to explain our solar system. Titan is a very unusual moon. As you can see, it looks fuzzy. That's because it has an atmosphere. Titan's atmosphere is mostly nitrogen, but it has some methane mixed in. That methane has caused all sorts of problems for evolutionary theories. You see, sunlight breaks methane down. Scientists have calculated that the methane in Titan's atmosphere could only last 10 million years or so, far short of the 4.5 billion years that it's supposed to be. However, there's still lots of methane there today. So, if Titan was really billions of years old, it would have two things. Number one, a source of methane to keep replenishing the atmosphere, and number two, a lot of ethane built up on its surface from all the methane that was broken down. Well, a few years ago, the Cassini spacecraft was sent to visit Saturn. It included a special probe to drop onto Titan and investigate this mysterious moon. Because evolutionists believe in billions of years, they confidently predicted we would find a deep global ocean of methane and ethane on Titan. One scientific paper predicted a layer of methane and other chemicals up to 800 meters thick. That's about a half-mile deep. One of the leaders of the Titan project went even further. He said, this remarkable moon could be covered by a global ocean of ethane with an average depth of up to several kilometers. However, even before the probe arrived, scientists were taking a closer look at Titan from Earth, and they started to realize this prediction was wrong. Then, when Cassini's lander finally penetrated the haze, the truth was confirmed. Despite the evolutionists' expectations, there is no global ocean of methane and ethane on Titan. Titan's surface is dry. All we found is some dark areas on the surface, mostly near the North Pole. These look like lake beds, and it appears that at least some of them are lakes of methane and ethane. However, they're still grossly inadequate to fulfill evolution's requirements. As one recent study commented, even if the dark spots were all lakes of methane, the methane on Titan's surface would only be about 1/10 the amount in the atmosphere. This small amount would only last 10 million years at most, not 4,500 million years. And there's another problem too. Since Titan's surface is solid, according to evolution it should have thousands of craters if it was really billions of years old. Remember how I explained about the crater counting idea? As of the time I'm making this video, the crater counters have thoroughly gone over about 10% of Titan's surface. They haven't found thousands of craters. So far they've found 4. Titan doesn't look billions of years old. Titan looks quite young. Titan might be just a moon, but it's a great demonstration of the failure of evolutionary theory. And as we prepare to leave Saturn, I had to tell you about one more thing, actually a pair of things. Here's another wonderful thing from our Creator. You're looking at Janus and Epimetheus, 2 moons of Saturn. You might not think they look very impressive. The thing here isn't how they look, it's what they do. These are now called the dancing moons of Saturn. These 2 moons orbit Saturn in their separate paths, one on the inside and one on the outside. But then, every 4 years, they switch. The one on the outside moves to the inside, and the one on the inside moves to the outside. Isn't that wonderful? It's a silent, graceful ballet going on deep in space. This has to be precisely balanced in order to work. What are the odds of this happening by chance? I think this is a great testimony to our Creator. So now we have to leave this part of our tour. Here's what you aren't being told about Saturn. Saturn, and Jupiter too for that matter, can't have formed according to the nebula theory, from that cloud of gas and dust. Computer simulations show that both planets would have migrated into the Sun billions of years ago. Saturn's magnetic field doesn't match evolutionary theories. Enceladus is young. Titan is young. And Saturn has dancing moons. Saturn tells us that our Creator is not only skilled, but he appreciates beauty.